As much as possible, we tried to record the cast together, and that was really important. We'd get the lines that are scripted for sure, but then Pierre and JP would say, just go play.
How soon did you start the conversation for The Bad Guys 2?
Oh boy. I think we started actually before the first one actually got released. The first one got released in April, and by December 2021, we kind of were feeling the pulse of this one and being like, wow, this is fun, this is exciting, those characters are really fun, and we want to see more of them actually. And so we put together some kind of a room with some of the artists who worked on the first film. After the first one released, the studio was excited enough to decide to do another one. I think we had a first draft of the script by June of 2022.
Tell me about, Damon, the conversations you had with your brain trust about taking bigger risks on The Bad Guys 2.
Well, that's exactly what we were trying to do. Take bigger risks, take bigger swings. We sort of did the hard work in the first movie of introducing audiences to these characters. And to get that out of the way was a real sort of relief. And it freed us up to like, oh, well, now we can actually explore the characters deeper, explore the dynamics of this team. The tone of the first movie was established. So we knew we could kind of go to some pretty, I'm going to use the word that our composer uses a lot, bonkers places. And so that really also freed us up. The movie, of course, is based on the series of books. There's 20 books in the series. So a lot of stories, a lot of adventures, new characters, and that's where we started.
Let's go. Bad guys in space and bad girls in space. But Floriane, tell me about how that was also both exhilarating to really go to another level, but also what are some of the challenges as, in art direction for that?
First, it was such a cool moment, and it was for us, how could we depict space? It has to be grounded. It would allow a character to evolve in it. It was a lot of fun.
How do we do space without doing the black and white space that we always see? Because when you're in space, the light is always the same, right? It's not obstructed by any kind of atmosphere. So there's incredibly sharp shadows and then very white light. From the beginning, it was how do we make space that doesn't look like the space we usually see? Sure. And how do we make something that feels colorful and popping and eye arresting, really?
It still needed to feel grounded,
right? Because
the comedy and the stakes don't work if the environments and the circumstances don't feel real and grounded.
With the trying to make space look unique, what kind of visual effects challenges did that bring? Unique visual effects for this movie.
When they're in space, what's unique about this film is our head of effects has a background in 2D effects. And so a lot of his ideas are kind of merged with our production designers. So they could seamlessly move between a 2D workflow right into 3D, back and forth. So you could actually have 2D effects animation driving procedural 3D animation and vice versa. It's all kind of hinging on 2D designs that are then re-implemented into our workflows.
I would love to ask, when it came to working with the screenwriters, working with the author, to find that right balance so everyone has an equal sort of amount of screen time, that no characters get lost, forgotten, that it really does feel like an ensemble where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, that's a pretty tricky challenge, to your point. I mean, Damon and I, when we work with our screenwriters, make sure and are very, very careful about every single time checking that we're giving a voice to each of the characters, and it's easy to forget them. Tarantula, for instance, Webbs is such a small character. First of all, you're going to forget her on screen because when you're pairing shark and wolf and snake together, the smaller characters really quickly get lost. And then if she doesn't have any lines in the movie, then she totally gets lost. And so I think we're very mindful of making sure that we can serve each of them because it's an ensemble film. And now we're adding 3 more. But the thing is, because we love them so much, we want to spend time with them. And so it's it's very much,
And we love the cast members so
and the
much.
Cast members.
And honestly, that was
a
motivator for us, because we'd be going into a recording session and it's you want to give the actors something fun to work with. So sometimes just before a session, we'd look at what we're planning to record and it's feeling a little light, and we'll do a quick meeting with our writer and say, okay, well, what can we come up with here that can deepen this character, or a little, even something that could suggest an improv moment for them, because we did actually get a lot of ad libs and improvs in the recording session.
Bet you did.
Yeah.
This cast, are you kidding?
And we did as much as possible. We tried to record the cast together, and that was really important, having them play off each other. We'd get the lines that are scripted for sure, but then Pierre and JP would say, just go play. Like, now you know the lines, have fun with it. Where would you take the character in this scene?
When it came to designing the new characters, the bad girls, were you already familiar with who was going to be cast in it? Or did you start to design these new characters before they were even cast?
By the time I came on, I think a lot of the designs were already more or less fleshed out. I mean, whenever you get to animation, you'll have your character designers, but then when you get to animation, there's always some refinement that happens, especially when a lot of the visualization is done in 2D first, and then we bring it into 3D. And something that was really important for us was to make sure that they all felt specific and grounded and real. And we had an acting consultant that we've worked with for a while, Alan Simpson. He'd help us curate a little sizzle reel, and then we put together this whole list of traits. What's the super objective? What is it the character wants most, and how does that manifest? Because Wolf is cool and he's always thinking, maybe he's always casing the joint. So whenever he comes into a room, sometimes you'll see him kind of look around, even just for a brief moment. We did the same thing with the bad girls. It's like, how do we introduce these new characters? It was integral to try to find out each of their unique voices, and so that they could feel distinct and different, and that people would love them for who they were.
In the case of this film, does the casting inspire the design?
Design kind of comes first because it comes from the characters on the page, and also like our own vision as designers and artists. But also after that, what we do is, like, we don't do auditions usually in animation. We mostly use samples of the actors' voices that we're thinking could be working for a role. And then we cut these samples of voices against the design that we generated beforehand. And so therefore, and see if that voice could correspond or could match that design. And I think it's a very interesting process, but it works really, really well.
Technology changes so fast. What were you able to do with visual effects and art direction on part 2 that maybe you weren't able to do on part 1? Let's start with you.
Bad Guys 1, we were kind of learning the style on the fly. And so we set up a lot of the workflows to be very malleable all the way through, to the point where a lot of them were very, very manual. So when we came onto the second film, how do we fold more of it back into a library so it shows up automatically? And what that allows us to do is then the artist can try more tricks, come up with more new ideas. We took like probably 80% of the manual tasks. And one, for example, relates to Ben, is the clothing. A lot of those folds are very inspired by anime. And on the first film, they're almost all hand sculpted. But we wanted more. We have these spacesuits now where we wanted these chunky anime folds. And so we backed all of that into the character effects libraries, which then allowed them to also plus their shot work further. So a lot of those chunky folds were almost coming automatically.
Yeah, it kind of helped us, like you said, to go further with some of the other stuff that we wanted to do as well. So we got a lot more automatically, and then we're able to go further.
We got the brain trust here on the stage here for the Bad Guys too. I like to go down the line and talk about the rocket launch, which is amazing.
For me, I think I sketched out that scene in a little couple illustrations very, very early on. So it's always been in my mind, because the idea was to send those characters in space. And it was like, how do we send them in space so it's not boring and it's fun? Because the Bad Guys, style is always kind of like taking stuff that you would see in live action film and just like giving that twist that is funny and silly and goofy. Like these characters jumping from a helicopter onto a rocket, and then after that clinging on like stupidly on that rocket. After that, the thought process is like, okay, well, they're gonna die, so they need to go like in a trapdoor or something. And so we bring those influences of anime and whatnot. We needed that junction between Earth and space to feel believable. Mm-hmm. And then to echo what Damon was saying is like the stakes have to be real. It has to be grounded. So it's like that's why we shot that rocket like a massive thing and make it feel like it's dangerous.
Quickly just add that, one of our inspirations was Mission Impossible. And so this was our opportunity to do a big Tom Cruise, Vin Diesel type stunt. And that sequence actually, all of our sequences have a title. That sequence is actually called Eat It, Vin Diesel.
Oh, wow. Love it. How about for your art direction on that scene?
You have to make sure that everything makes sense for the story. They have to have a clear view of the rocket. So they have to be slightly in an elevated location with the angle, and everything has to make sense.
So I actually did go back and watch a ton of launch footage going back to the early 2000s, and I plotted out all speeds and trajectories and gave a whole chart to our head of previs, and they actually followed it. And part of this was we wanted downstream to get something that was kind of in the ballpark of real, and then we could fake it from there because we completely ridiculous. So those speeds and trajectories coming out of previs were actual speeds of what a real rocket would do.
While everyone else was focused on grounding it and making it real, we broke it. Yeah. I mean, we obviously wanted it to still feel believable that they were climbing up the side of a rocket as much as you can. But I think taking, all this inspiration from some of our favorite animated films, from Mission Impossible and that sort of thing, some of our favorite anime, even down to some of the posing, like when they're, one of my favorite shots, and maybe this is the best example, is like where the boosters have just come off the rocket and all the bad guys are starting to run up the rocket, and there's a shot that chases them, up it. As it gets higher into the atmosphere, they're going to get more and more frozen, so they're going to get more and more stiff, not only in their clothing but in how they move. Their expressions kind of like freeze. But collaborating with effects and art and those teams to figure out what shots, when was that going to happen, when was the frost going to start showing up. It looks super cool and visual, and it's composed really nicely, but if you were to see it in the actual 3D scene and you were to pivot around with the camera to see it, we took the rocket and we bulged it to look like a big sphere. So they're like running along the sphere that is turning, and then we took the shuttle that's on the end of it, and just translated it straight up in the background, kind of how they would have done in some of those old films where you've got this one plate and then you've got a whole nother frame behind it, and you're just sliding that one frame up, to get that same sort of feel. So something that I love so much about the Bad Guys universe is finding that grounding so that it feels believable, but then figuring out how can we still make it feel so stylized and believable,
Thank you all so much for an amazing conversation. Congrats on the Bad Guys too.